What is up? Another week. That last video just made it in time, didn't it? It's tough. You know, I do everything here damn near by myself. You know, I got a little bit of help. German people must have like the smallest fingers ever when they designed this car. I hook this battery cable back up. First crank. Nothing. Let's shed some light for you guys. Oh! Some light for you guys. Oh, yeah. Oh no. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Come on. Come on. I'm not letting go until this thing's running. Woo! Backfire. What is up? Matt Pratt here with hustleworx. Last week, if you didn't see the video, check it out, but it pretty much shows what we went through to get this side of the Porsche like this. Tonight, we're actually gonna work on this side, and I'll tell you what, this side should be a little easier. Let's check it out. Right here, we just got some burn paint. We'll strip all that stuff off. Looks like it carries it all the way out to here. A little bit of rust down there. As for the warped metal from welding, it doesn't feel too hateful. I'm gonna put a fiberglass filler on this side also that will help, you know, fill most of that. This side looks a lot better than the other side. If you haven't seen last week's video, check it out. This entire thing was jacked up with mud, and the contour here was so different. So we can definitely tell by looking at this that this only has maybe a few paint jobs on it. The other side was like this thick of mud. So all this is pretty good, straightforward, a lot better than the other side. Hopefully I can cruise through that. Looks like it's a little low right here. I could probably get behind there and tap that out. But one of the issues that I noticed is actually the door over here has a lot of previous mud work. And if you look right here, I'll try to get the light in it. You see that little change in reflection there? That's actually, it looks like something's coming out. So it's got a couple areas of that. What sucks is I'm gonna have to dig that out. I hope it's not too deep in body filler. It doesn't look like it, but you just never know. Other than that, you know, the door's pretty straight, no major dings. It's just gonna suck getting into that because that might turn into a big problem. All right, well, enough talking about this car, man. I'm wasting time. I gotta get this thing done, so let's get on it. we got our fiberglass filler on. This stuff, when it dries, man, it's hard as a rock. It's really one of the hardest fillers out there. That's why we like to use that first, because usually you put this on really thick and you want it to be just as hard as metal. You have a less chance of it cracking or whatever. It started drying on me really fast right here, which is gonna suck, but I'm just gonna have to rough that up in a little bit and probably reapply, sand it down a little bit and then probably reapply, you know, something in there. One thing I gotta make sure I do is not lose this hole. This is a big deal. I lost it on the other side. I have to stick my finger in there and get it out. Alright, well, looks good. Next step is to start sanding on this thing. Yay! So I ripped down the fiberglass filler in 40 grit. It was on there pretty thick, so I decided to take a coarser sandpaper to it. This side is definitely, the metal is warped way worse than the other side. I actually had to take the hammer and dolly to a couple spots on here that were low. A lot of times whenever you're welding two pieces of metal together and it starts to warp, it's warping because both pieces are like super hot, and you should keep your hammer and dolly at your side because that's a good time to hammer and dolly the metal together, and you can actually get it to shrink back. but it definitely didn't do that. So I get the job of doing it when it's cold, which is a little tougher to get it to shrink back together. The rear here is a little bit worse in some areas. I'm going to hammer dolly a little bit more, but either way, feels as close as it's going to get, and it should fill in when I finally put the heavyweight filler on there. Sweet. Right, I got my mud on there, about 11-15. So when the mud is not completely dry, like not completely cured, it's kind of like rubbery feeling. I actually take an old piece of sandpaper and just kind of rough off. See, you got like this line here. This line could cause an issue when you're trying to sand it, because you have to sand that line down first. So what you do is to knock off all those lines, just kind of rough it down, and all this stuff just kind of comes off, and then gives you a really good surface to start blocking with. So you see over here, it was a little bit too rubbery. Like it's still a little tacky, a little too tacky to do that, but these lines right here are lines I'd like to knock off, and the best time to do that is before the mud is completely dry. Easiest time to do that. So anyways, let's start blocking this sucker. this mud is finally nice and hard. Now, when I say mud probably sounds really bad, but in the body shop world, we just call it mud. It's actually a really good quality body filler. This one is actually 3M. I've been using it for years and don't really have any major issues. It's definitely not your typical Bondo. So when I'm blocking this, I definitely use like an assortment of blocks here. Dura blocks just mainly do it. That's like a bigger one. I use a round one. This is probably my favorite, this thin one. When you got a lot of contours like this thin one works really well. You can kind of hold on its side and use this edge too, you know, whenever you're going up against those areas. So this is my short one, and I definitely use a couple different sandpapers too. For some reason this sandpaper is 80 grit, just like this 80 grit block paper, and this cuts so much better. So sometimes I'll stick it on there, I'll stick it on there, but then when I don't need such an aggressive 80 cut, but I still need it to kind of cut like 80, you know, I'll use the stick it paper. And then in the end, when everything's finished off in 80, I'll take 180 to it. Alright, we got our heavyweight filler sanded down. The next step is to put on some medium weight filler, and then we're going to actually sand it with a finer grit scratch, and hopefully that's going to be the last coat of filler that we're going to put on this. Over here we have medium filler already laid out. I'm going to sand this down, and hopefully this is the last coat of filler we'll have on this. There we go, we got that medium weight filler skimmed on there pretty good. Just a couple areas I needed to build it up a little more. This definitely doesn't look the prettiest right now. Alright, that is a rough cut in 80, just blocked down. This is a rough cut in 80, it's just blocked down. All this has to be going back over in 180 before I put some spray filler on it. The next step that I'm going to do right now is I'm actually going to start blocking down this door. Some of the issues I've seen with this door is that a couple waves here and there. A couple issues with the paint. I'm hoping that it isn't any deeper than the paint. Then I'm going to have to dig it out and re-repair the door. And then a couple waves down there. So that is going to be the next step. And then hopefully if this goes smooth, finish blocking the rest of this with 180, and then it will be ready for primer. Alright, I don't want to bust through the paint too much. I think it's blocked down pretty good. I felt it. A lot of the stuff did come out. It was very, very minor, but nothing that I wanted to risk. So we're just going to leave it like that. We're almost done, so next thing I got to do is go over this whole side of 180. Alright, I got the mud work all blocked out, door blocked down, quarter blocked out. I think this side is actually good, so that means next step is to prime this thing. But the primer that I ordered is not here yet. It should be here next week. So in the meantime, I'm going to edit this video so I can get this out this week. So, well, that's it for that. I'll tell you what, if you like me, if you like what you see, do me a favor, subscribe so you can see what I do every week. I am out of here.